Welcome back to Roster the People. 32 teams in 32 days. Today is the 9th of August as we sit down to record this. Uh, Before we get into all the usual PSAs, is everybody excited for preseason football?
I had a good time. I like just seeing them get out there and there was a little bit of, tensions in camp and stuff in the joint practices. So, I was more so excited to see sparks fly, but it was a little bit more mild. But you know what? The NFL is in a pretty good place. There are some rosters with some depth now. We didn't necessarily see, a huge workload from the awesome players here at the start of P week 1. With, if anybody is watching this well ahead of time when this goes out, we are recording this on August 9th, the day after preseason week 1 kickoff. So I'm stoked though. Football's back.
Yeah, 2 games last night, more games tonight, more games throughout the weekend. I do like how they're staggering it now. I think that's smart. You get more eyes. It's nice. Selfishly, it's nice for people to do what we do a little bit. Might be annoying for you, Mason. I don't know where you weigh in on that exactly, rather than just have one hell day versus kind of hell weekend. Like,
It's a mix. So I won't get into it too much, but when the season really does get rolling and the Maction starts running on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, it becomes no longer fun to spread all that out. So
I should wrap myself in my Kent State flag for some of these.
Hey, we talked enough about Antonio Gates in the Chargers episode, all right?
Jesus. Tune in for that. If you haven't seen the annual Chargers train wreck, go nuts. Have fun with that. I'll take the engagement. We did talk a lot more about Antonio Gates than one would ever expect for a show that's being recorded in 2024. That definitely happened. There was a lot of Antonio Gates conversation. So there is that. But yes, as Mason mentioned, so Neil Smith, Mike Burland, Mason Cameron, back at you. Today, as Mason mentioned, is the 9th of August. So there was 2 games last night, bunch of games tonight. If anything we say sounds a little weird or dated, that would be why. Tune in for the wrap-up show, which is tentatively scheduled for the 31st. It'll be a live stream. We'll update that as we get everybody's schedules finalized and figure out exactly how that needs to work. But we're going to be updating all the takes, and then that will be released as a podcast as well. So if you can't tune in, we'd love to tune in live, but we'll also release it so you can catch up right before draft weekend for anything that needs to be updated. So today, as you saw and as you read and as you can see from my background, we're going to talk about Minnesota. We're going to talk about Minnesota Vikings. Skol, baby. Although this is a fun one for me because the last couple of years, the Minnesota Vikings show, you could literally just like treat it like Madden, where you just cross off the number and then put the new number on because it was the same show every time. So for the first time in like 4 years, we actually have to do this show properly. So that's kind of interesting. So it's not going to be the same Vikings team. Before we get into that, a couple quick PSAs. This is your 2024 draft primer. So this is all based on 12-team redraft, PPR scoring, 16-round league or 16-round draft. So that's kind of the most popular format at this point. That's what most people play in. So it's kind of it makes the most sense to catch it.
Say the line, Neil. Say the line.
Say the line?
Yeah, say the line. God's format.
God's
Lord's format.
Yeah, the Lord's format. God's format. That's right. PPR 12 team. If you're not playing in that, you're doing it wrong. You're a sinner. No, I'm kidding. There's all kinds of fun ways to play fantasy football. Do what feels right for you, as long as it's not the old standard scoring format. Then I do judge you. Outside of that, I have no predispositions or judgments, except for you people still playing standard in 2024. I genuinely don't know what's wrong with you. That is an insane way to do it. It's just, how do you devalue wide receiver like that in the modern football era? Crazy. But yeah, you'll hear us reference a lot of rankings and ADPs. Those come courtesy of Fantasy Pros. Many of us are part of their ECR, so our rankings get slushed in with that. If we have any crazy, deviations from that, you'll hear us talk about it as we go along. So those are the standard PSAs here. And there you go. So now we can actually kind of dive straight into the Vikings. For the first time in forever, Kirk Cousins is no longer the quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings. No one gets to the window like Kirk Cousins, baby. Baby. Nobody gets those free agency paychecks like that man does. That is I love it. I love it.
What a time to be alive.
What a time to be alive.
It's the epitome of timing the market.
It is. Usually they say time in the market will always beat timing the market, unless you're Kirk Cousins and Kirk Cousins' agent. Then you just time the market again and again and again, and it's pretty impressive. So the Vikings finally ran up into cap hell, couldn't keep that team going anymore, and frankly, it became apparent after last season that some things had to change. It just didn't make sense to keep kind of rolling that same team out there and then having the exact same results, which is literally what kept happening. And also, you were starting to see the cracks. Kirk Cousins clearly wasn't happy with, Vikings leadership, and I think that knife cut both ways, and it just made sense that they don't even have the cap money to keep doing this anyway. So it's time for the Vikings to figure out what to do. So they did two things. One thing they did was they went and got Sam Darnold for the NFL equivalent of $1.50 to come and hang out, attempt to do this, and then eventually probably be wearing a baseball cap for a significant part of the rest of the year, because the Vikings in the NFL draft this year selected J.J. McCarthy, the quote-unquote future of the Vikings organization. As you can tell by my dismissive hand gesture, we're going to get into that. I don't know how I feel about all that. It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him. That's kind of where we are. So with that, it is interesting to see how this breaks down. J.J. McCarthy is opening as the QB 29, which would translate to 196 overall. His ADP is the QB 23, which would translate to a 15th round pick. So there is a Vikings QB being drafted. It is J.J. McCarthy, and it's very much at the last two rounds of drafts in leagues where he is being drafted. How do we feel about that here as a society? Mike, how do you feel about that first? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not drafting JJ McCarthy in a one quarterback league. Sam Darnold, yeah, obviously I think he's going to start. That's kind of what everyone's saying. Seems to be the starter, unofficial depth
listed
chart
as
stuff.
The one on the depth chart currently.
Yeah, and I don't think it's actually crazy to think I think Sam Darnold might do okay. More for Justin Jefferson and Addison. Just kind of. I trust the system more than the quarterback, and we've seen situations around the NFL where if the system is good with good skill position players around them, the quarterback can be passable whether they're good or not. So I'm not going to draft Sam Darnold. I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised if waiver wire week 7 when 6 teams are on byes, we're talking about, hey, stream Sam Darnold or something if he makes it that far. And then one little note, Nick Mullins in the 3 games he started last year, he was throwing the ball almost 40 times a game, averaged 370 yards and 2.5 touchdowns. So it doesn't really matter. This team's going to throw the ball 70% of the time. So I hope it's Darnold for the sake of the skill position guys. And I think he can at least get it done in the sense of supporting those guys so we're not just completely disappointed.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, if you're going to be investing in Justin Jefferson this season, you kind of hope that it's Sam Darnold that's going to be throwing him the ball, because you're going to have volatility, but you're at least going to get somebody that is going to push the ball down the field a little bit. What we've seen so far with JJ McCarthy in camp is reports of kind of placing him as being shaky, rushing his footwork, not trusting his reads. The game is moving too fast for him right now. Now, JJ McCarthy's had a lot of really good advice from great players like Peyton Manning, reinforcing him to slow down, take it all in stride, not put so much pressure on him. And the team is actually doing that, which I can commend them for, because a lot of the times the thought is we need to rush this guy out there because we want to win now. And he's our best option right now. And it's like, well, if you need to go in there, read the room, talk to your young quarterback, gauge how he's feeling, and act accordingly. And so I give them all the credit in the world for doing that, and they're not going to rush JJ McCarthy along. So with that being said, fade both of them, because you're just better off in a different situation. And maybe it's a move down the road where, like Mike is talking about, you keep track of both these guys on the waiver wire, but do not be the team that takes this dart throw on JJ McCarthy. You are going to be sitting on that for 5+ weeks this season. I promise you, they are not concerned about rushing him out right now.
Yeah, that's going to be your issue, is that you're going to take him at the end of your draft, and then you're going to need to get through buys, and you're going to need to deal with injuries, and you're going to end up having to cut him anyway, because you're not going to be able to carry that many quarterbacks on your roster, because he would probably be your 3rd quarterback by that point. So what's the point? Just leave it there, and then don't worry about JJ McCarthy because he'll be widely available on the waiver wire when he inevitably does get to start at some point later in the season, whenever that is, because you know it's coming. The odds that Sam Darnold gets the whole season are very, very minuscule, in my opinion. They will at some point need to see what they have in JJ. He is their future. But I think to your point, Mason, the Vikings are actually being very realistic about who they are right now. And they are not a contender to even win the division. It's not a playoff team anymore. It's a rebuild. We're going to go slow. We know who we are. And I give them a certain level of credit for having that level of self-awareness and not thinking, oh no, we don't retool, we reload. And it's like, no, that's not who you are right now. You are firmly rebuilding this team, and that's what you got to do. So don't draft either quarterback. You don't need to worry about either quarterback. There's many better options available. And then this is more just something we'll see for the future. It's like what Mike was saying. It's just a question of, can these guys not crater out the skill position players that you actually are probably interested in drafting? Speaking of new running backs, we have new running backs in Minnesota. Mike, you mentioned they were throwing it 40 times a game last year. Don't know if they were thrilled about that. You know what I mean? So they went and made some changes. Whether or not those changes are going to work, we're going to get into right now. As opposed to Alexander Madison, he is no longer with the team. I can't say I'm surprised by that, given how that relationship also appeared to be deteriorating towards the end. And they went out and signed Aaron Jones from the Packers. That's an interesting one to me because it really tells you what the Packers thought about Aaron Jones by the end. And it also really tells you what division opponents think about Aaron Jones. And that it's an interesting one because Jones has had an on-again, off-again career where when he's healthy, he's been phenomenal. But that really does become the issue when he's healthy. So for those of you who were playing along last year, you might have got torched by Aaron Jones because on the first series of the first game, he didn't tear it, but he pulled his hamstring really seriously running in a touchdown. So he ran in a touchdown and then limped to the sideline, immediately grabbing at his hamstring, and everybody watching was like, why does this keep happening? And it's so frustrating because when he's healthy, he's got good burst. He's got really good hands. He's an incredible pass catcher. And I think that's what the allure is that the Vikings know they need somebody who can kind of do both things. You need somebody who can run between the tackles and catch passes. So within that, it does get interesting to see how the fantasy community evaluates Aaron Jones. So he opens as the RB18, which is pretty high for a guy who was pretty disastrous last year and really hurt a lot of people. But even still, he opens as the RB18, which would translate to 64 overall by ranking. His ADP, guess what? RB18. 6th round pick. So that's the top of the 6th round for Aaron Jones. How do you guys break down the Aaron Jones situation?
Personally, I can understand where this evaluation is coming from. Oddly enough, Aaron Jones is kind of the player I want to roster on this roster as sort of a value. I mean, the top of the 6 isn't exactly pegged as a value, but I think you're going to get.
But he was a 2nd round pick last year.
Right, exactly.
That's the important piece of context.
Exactly. So I think when you think about this, he's going to be like your 3rd running back potentially. And I think you have a huge upside there. Obviously hampered by injuries, but the last thing we saw of this dude, he was on a tear, an absolute tear from week 16 on. 91.4 rushing grade, best in the NFL since that span. 5.7 yards per carry, 4.1 after contact per carry, 29 forced missed tackles. That's 9 more than CMC in that span, who is the next highest player. And it's the same story when you talk about runs of over 15 yards. He had 19, 6 more than JT over that span. Like, this dude was playing out of his mind on one of the best stretches of his career is the last we saw of him. So it's one of those things that it's like you said, the injury history is a definite concern, especially if he's capable of popping his hammy in the first week. But I think what you have to go with is kind of what we just recently perceived of him, which is he can still play. And if things are healthy, at least you would hope so early in the season, then you might go ahead and pull this trigger right here. And I think it could potentially be a good value for you. Now, should you bank on him the whole season? Nah, probably not. But he's going to have a really huge burst for you at some point.
Yeah, I kind of see both sides here with Aaron Jones. Like, I understand the people that want to avoid him because, you know, what happened last year. But like we've been saying, when he's healthy, and even last year, he didn't slow down at all. He was still really damn good. I don't know if the numbers you mentioned, Mason, include the playoffs as well, but he had over 200 yards rushing in the playoffs, the two playoff games. So yeah, he was awesome. There is a concern, like we just talked about it, like this offense could kind of crater out a bit. And, you know, you generally want players on good offenses, especially, you know, running backs for touchdown opportunities. I don't think he's going to be their main guy. I do think they're going to mix in the next guy behind him. So I kind of see both sides. It's tough, though. He's going in that range of guys I do really like, guys like James Conner, David Montgomery. They're like right after him. And I like those two guys as well. So he's in that range. Like I'm fine with where those guys are. I'm fine if you want to draft Aaron Jones. But I also see the other side of, you know, being a little bit worried about just his ability to stay healthy. He's a 29-year-old running back who, you know, has shown in the past to be a little unhealthy at times, especially last year.
Yeah.
He's right in what I call like, Mike, we've talked about this on other shows. Like the second and third round this year is kind of scary. But when you start getting into the fifth and sixth round, you start finding these weird running back values, and you listed off the heavy hitters, Montgomery, Connor, and Jones. Because the upside, it's all the guys that are older that they're a little bit of concern, but I feel like you're getting a huge discount compared to what your theoretical ceiling could be. Like, it wouldn't shock me if all three of those guys, when we re-ranked it at the end of the year, should have been third-round values. So there is some risk, but the risk is baked in as far as I'm concerned for all three of those players. Jones, I think, actually weirdly has the highest upside of any of those three. Because it could turn into a situation where he's just Mr. Everything. And he's the last, besides Jefferson, you know what I mean? But it's like, he could turn into like the number 2 option on this team basically immediately. Like the number 2 target getter, like just the second option behind Jefferson, Justin Jefferson. So it's one of those situations where it's like, I'm not afraid, especially because of what we're going to talk about now, which is backing him up is Ty Chandler. For those of you who were playing last year, Ty Chandler came on towards the end of the year after Madison more or less flamed out, and he was hurt, and you can't totally blame him for that. But they like Ty Chandler enough for what they're paying him to where they are going to give him opportunities, and I think they are going to use him to spell Aaron Jones, because I don't think they're going to want to crush Aaron Jones completely, knowing kind of what we just discussed about some perceived durability issues and things like that. Chandler doesn't really excite me. He's a volume play. He's not the best pass catcher. He's not the worst pass catcher either, but he's not the best pass catcher, not the best pass blocker either. And he is, though, a very good between the tackles runner, but it's not what I would call exciting. He's kind of a plotter. He's a little bit of a ham and egger, but it's one of those situations where if he was ever to get meaningful work, which could happen with Jones going down, if that did happen. The thing about this is Ty Chandler opens as the RB 46, translates to 149 overall by ranking. He's going as the RB 48 in the 14th round. So what this is he's on my list. Welcome to the must handcuff list, folks. There's not many.
Why is it always Vikings backs too?
I don't know.
Always Vikings backs are like, this is the most valuable handcuff.
I don't know. I don't know why we keep doing this, but you are correct. This happens a lot. There aren't very many must handcuffs. This is only the second one of all the shows we've done on the must handcuff list for me. But this to me makes a lot of sense. If I'm going to invest a 6th round pick into Aaron Jones, I'm absolutely going to invest a 14th round pick in Ty Chandler, and I'll just take them both. Because the issue is that if you try to wait on the Ty Chandler thing, that's going to be very expensive later. So in season, if something did happen to Jones, this is where our friend Mike on Mondays with Jason will be telling you, go blow a huge part of your fab budget to get Ty Chandler, because it's the starting running back in the NFL at that point. And it's like, no, that's what it is.
Neil's saying that right now because he doesn't want to answer all your trade questions of how do I get a hold of Ty Chandler later.
Selfish as hell, as always. Nothing happens without self-motivation, Mason, in all things. You got to take care of number 1, baby. I really don't want to sit there and have to answer those questions over and over and over again. So there you go. That's my ulterior motive has been rooted out. Oh no. But I'm just going to clip this actually, and then just keep posting this clip. Just there you go. So no, get Ty Chandler. If you're going to go the Aaron Jones route, and that's the way your draft works, that's how the draft falls to you, make it a point to get Ty Chandler. I'd even be willing to go around early in the 13th round just to make sure I had it. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal with having to figure this out later because there's nobody on this team that I'm afraid of. The other guys on the team are Keenan Naganu, Myles Gaskin, whatever. I know some people like Myles Gaskin, whatever. CJ Ham, CJ Ham's going to play fullback. These are not things that I'm worried about cutting into the two main guys. So I want them both. I want them now. There's only spoiler alert, there's 3 or 4 must handcuffs this year. It's 3 and then maybe 4. We found the second one. There it is. So you really want to get Ty Chandler. That's my take on this whole running back room for fantasy. If I get one, I want them both. To be honest with you, I'm not super interested in rostering Ty Chandler in and of himself. If I don't get Jones, I'm content to let somebody else deal with that. Whatever. But if I do have Jones, I'm targeting to get Chandler just because I don't want to deal with the headache later. That's where I am. And I would invest in this running back room. I would do it. I have no problem with that.
I think they're going to run quite a bit.
Yeah.
I know we talked about how they still passed quite a bit last year, but I think that might have been a function of the roster. I think they're going to be running quite a bit, especially if they bring JJ back.
Yeah, Madison was struggling terribly. So I think they are not trying to throw the ball 40 times a game if they can avoid that. I don't think. Yeah. I think if they're throwing the ball 40 times a game, something has gone badly wrong. They don't strike me as a team that wants to do that. I think 30 times a game is probably more real, is what they want to be. Let's go into wide receiver here. So wide receiver, the elephant in the room is that Justin Jefferson, right? Justin Jefferson. It's a blue chip wide receiver. He opens as the wide receiver 5. He's going 6 overall in fantasy drafts. His ADP is wide receiver 3. His ADP is 4. So he's ranked at 6 overall total. So 6th pick total. He's going at 4. So that tells you what people don't appear to be scared of Justin Jefferson, despite the worries about the quarterback and despite them maybe not throwing it as much. I don't really feel like we need to spend a whole lot of time on Justin Jefferson. Does anybody really want to talk about Justin Jefferson? And he good.
So the thing is I think the public is pegging him just a touch too high. I think the actual projection of around 6 is probably more accurate, and it has nothing to do with Justin as a player. He's phenomenal. He's fantastic, even without, even with some injury, last year, and with the issues at quarterback, he still had a really good season. So when we look at that, I think what you can say is he's still a really talented player. If he's not in this situation right now, I would probably lean towards some of the other guys. If that is the area that you find yourself in your drafts, I would probably try to lean towards one of the other guys before I reach just a tiny little bit for Justin there, but still a phenomenal player. One of the issues actually comes down to a situation, which we'll get into here in a second when we talk about Jordan Addison, but yeah.
Yeah, he shouldn't be falling past pick 8, in my opinion. He's part of that elite 8 of guys. Yeah. If you want to take Amon-Ra or Chase or Brees or Bijan over him, fine. But if you want to take him 5th or 6th, sure. He was still wide receiver 3 overall in the 4 games without the 4 full games he played without Cousins last year. So, he's just awesome. The offensive system, I trust to get him 10 targets a game. So
I was going to say he was still getting his even when it was Nick Mullins.
Yeah.
And so I don't expect that to change. That's why I was saying I don't really want to spend a lot of time on it. Mike, I think that's a good way to put it. If he's still there past pick 8, it's an auto pick. You just slam dunk it at that point because people are scared at that point, and they should pay for being scared at that point. Because I could make the argument for a couple guys in that neighborhood, but nothing past 8 or 9 really. You should be slamming that 100%. Really, the more interesting conversation is Jordan Addison, who was mentioned. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this either, but Jordan Addison was arrested for doing something very stupid and getting a DUI. Feel free to look into it yourself. It's all over the news if you want to educate yourself as to what actually happened, which is a shame because Jordan Addison is actually a player that I very much like. and liked his game coming out of college. He was able to accomplish. And then last year, I was recommending him. He was fantastic. And I know a lot of people were like, well, why would you want the second guy on a team that has an all-world wide receiver one? And it's like, because of coverage. they're gonna devote coverage to Jefferson. So Addison's gonna be running like crazy. And that's what happened. Addison is facing single coverage and lesser corners. And he proved pretty quickly that he's an electric athlete with really good hands, great separation, great burst. His route running might need a little bit of work, but to be honest with you, as long as he still has the burst, I'm good. So Addison was actually, before the arrest, one of the players that I actually was recommending as he was too low. He should be coming up based on what he was able to accomplish. But now the arrest really muddies all of that. He opens as the wide receiver 42, which would be 98 overall by ranking in the ECR. I will say the public isn't scared. They're still taking him as the wide receiver 36, which would translate to a 7th round pick, top of the 2nd round or 7th round, actually. And that is an interesting conversation because we just don't know about the potential suspension. So what do you guys think about it? Do you think Addison is actually going to be suspended? He was just arrested in July.
They always talk about the, law process playing itself out. The NFL is really good about sitting on their hands in situations like this at times. Or I shouldn't say sitting on their hands, but letting the situation play itself out.
Waiting.
Yeah, as opposed to shooting too quick, too early, or whatever. So you might not see any suspension this season. There's talks that there may be. There's a number of players around the league that are sort of waiting in limbo for potential suspensions. This close to the season, maybe they happen, maybe they don't. I think generally for me, I don't like that unknown, and I would stay away from that situation. But Jordan Addison is a supremely talented player that plays in a situation that, like you said, is going to get him open quite a bit. Now, he had some struggles with catching contested balls. When guys do get to him, he doesn't quite finish plays. So you do want to see a little bit more of that. But like you said, a supremely talented player. I'm just a little hesitant on the unknown there.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. If we knew he wasn't getting suspended, I'm kind of in on it, but we just don't know. I mean, I think I read that his plea hearing stuff is, the arraignment plea hearing is on early October sometime. So sometime in there. Could something happen then? Maybe. But yeah, it's tough because a lot of his value was in touchdowns last year too. And especially when Justin Jefferson was there. And you kind of needed that touchdown to make him worthy of a start when Jefferson was on the field. And we're talking about, we are concerned about the quarterback play. And, this is an issue potentially, and they could run the ball more. So, yeah, I think to avoid the headache, I do just avoid him unless he falls even more. So that's kind of where I'm at, though. It's tough because he is a talented player. He had a really good rookie year.
So the issue for Addison, as far as I'm concerned, is I don't think he's getting suspended because they at this point, they learned from years ago, you don't shoot from the hip on this and start putting people on the NFI list or suspending them proactively, because then what happens if everything gets thrown out and now you look stupid? So it's like they got into a lot of hot water for adjudicating before the actual legal system. So now what they do is they just don't do anything. They wait for the legal system to do what it's going to do. And then the minute you're found guilty, they suspend you. I see no universe where he is going to get arraigned, go through the legal system that has to happen, and then get suspended in that short amount of time. I think this is an Alvin Kamara situation where this is going to take an entire year to work itself out. So I don't think this is going to happen this year. I think next year there's a very real chance that he gets suspended, but I think we're going to have some time on that. There's one caveat to that, which is based on how the legal system works. If he pleads guilty or he pleads no contest, they go directly to sentencing. If that happens, he will be suspended in season. That's what you're worried about. So really, you got to wait for this arraignment, see how he pleads. If he pleads not guilty, you're good. That's my opinion. If he pleads guilty, no, that's bad. That is bad. And to be honest with you, when you look up what he did, I could see him pleading guilty. Look, I'm just not going to show. They found him passed out in a car. That's pretty hard to like. That's going to be hard. Like, who's your lawyer? The ghost of Johnny Cochran? Like, did you Zombie Cochran is who we have? Like, it's just going to be hard, man. So that's the question. You got to wait for when's the arraignment, Mike? You just said it.
It's early October. I think it's like the 6th or 7th.
So that's the problem, is that you won't know before your draft. That's the issue here, is that we're not going to know. So you gotta wait for the arraignment, then we see. So you might be dealing with this really getting a kick in the pants later on in the year. So it's rough. So what I've been doing is, in leagues where he falls to like the 8th, 9th round, I snatch him up. In leagues where he's going at his ADP in the 7th, I'm okay. Somebody else can deal with this problem. I'm not gonna like sweat it. There's other stuff that's available at that time that is comparable. It's okay. I'll let somebody else deal with it. So that's kind of where I land on Addison. Very frustrating situation here, because prior to him getting arrested, I was like, 7th round pick seems pretty good. Seems like you got a little bit of meat on that bone. You know what I mean? That might be something that you're really happy you did later in the year, because it's not the value he was in his rookie year, but hey, there's still some value left for you. But yeah, if he's the first pick of the 7th round, there's other things in the 7th round that are comparable vehicles that I'm waiting. I'll just deal with that. It's fine. So that's kind of how it lands. It does mess with the Justin Jefferson situation a little bit, because only a little bit though, because if Justin Jefferson, if Addison is suspended and he's not out there, teams are going to lock in on Justin Jefferson very aggressively, because the rest of the guys in the room, they have no ADPs and are not being drafted for a reason. You're talking about Brandon Powell, who we've seen little flashes of. You're talking about Jalen Naylor. I'm good. Trent Sherfield, seen that, been there, done that. And N'Keal Harry, seen that, been there, done that. None of those guys moves the needle for me in a real way. KJ Osborne's not on the team anymore. We don't have to have that conversation anymore. The best one for my money is Powell. Powell probably going to be the guy who would slot in, but not really interested in Brandon Powell. Maybe as like a waiver wire bye-week fill-in type of deal. But with the quarterback play, the reason I bring that up is because, as we're going to get into, TJ Hawkinson is still hurt. So if it's just Justin Jefferson, okay, I'm going to triple cover Justin Jefferson on every play. Like, that's literally what I'm going to do. And I'm going to say, you can beat me with Aaron Jones and nothing. And if you can, congratulations to you. You did it. But that's literally how I think every defensive coordinator in the league will attack this team, is we're going to lock down Jefferson. And that's what I don't love about all of this. Am I crazy? Anybody want to walk me back from the ledge on that?
No, that's what I was kind of trying to indicate with the talk earlier, is that while he's a supremely talented player, they're not going to have a ton outside of Justin that they are going to have to feed him the ball. And I don't know. I think that if I'm a defensive coordinator, nothing scares me. I'm going to sell out to double your guy and force you to beat me with somebody else.
Cover Justin Jefferson on every play, and then I'm even going to assign extra help if I can. And you could beat me with the rest of it. Good luck. See if you can do it.
Right.
I doubt you can. I doubt you could. So that's the problem. Very frustrating situation, isn't it? And yeah, it doesn't sound like anybody really wants to talk about any of the other wide receivers on this team. So, which I feel is correct. TJ Hawkinson, as I mentioned, is still the starting tight end for this team. Still hurt. Really a gruesome injury last year. And I feel bad for TJ, because he doesn't deserve this. We frequently don't deserve the things that happen to us in life. And I feel bad but that being said, he's going to start on the PUP list. There is no universe where TJ Hawkinson is ready, given the gruesome knee injury he suffered last year. Like, it's not happening. So he opens as the tight end 15, which would translate to 125 overall by ranking, which I think is still too high. And the public has got him as the tight end 13, 9th round pick. No. Honey, no. Oh, honey, no. No universe where that's a good idea.
I'll be honest, I think some of the public forgot about the injury. I really do. I don't know what draws in somebody's mind to to value this like this after seeing his knee injury, hearing reports from camp that he's not anywhere close to coming back.
No, he's not even really practicing.
No. So what are we drafting for here? He's week 7 at maybe the earliest is when you'll see him.
I think he'd be limping.
And it would be hobbled. And
Yeah.
and guess what? The Vikings aren't going to be in contention. They have no reason to rush him back. I would say that you'll be lucky if you get him by halfway through your fantasy season, and he's not going to equate back the value that you spent drafting and stashing him for however many weeks it takes. So I would just pass. It's a tough situation. It's just a really tough situation for a guy like Hawk in a position like tight end where there's just not a ton of options.
Yeah.
I imagine when the official on the pup to begin the year, this is going to drop. I always tell people, like, with these type of injuries, okay, so he's out the first 6 weeks. You're not starting in week 1. You're going to wait. You're going to wait until you see a good game from him.
Yeah. You won't put him in the first week. No way.
Yeah, the first week he's back. So, and he's probably going to be limited. So it's really like, it's a 6 game. It's really a 7 or 8 games at least, until you see something. So always add 1 to 2 games on these type of injuries for these type of players where, we're not talking about, he's a great tight end and stuff, but we're not talking about, Justin Jefferson or something who you start from week 1 on. But
right.
I imagine the ADP is going to plummet once he gets on that.
It should. It should. I cannot recommend strongly enough that no one should draft TJ Hockenson at all. And I don't mean like in the 9th round. I mean, period. Like, do not draft TJ Hockenson. We talked about this on another show. We don't really do the do not draft list anymore because typically anyone eventually has some level of, usability. This would make the do not draft list if we were still doing that. 100%, this would be on there. It'd be right near the top, where it's like it's just not a good idea. Just let this go. Let someone else do it. I would be encouraging other people to do it in my league. Like, I would absolutely. People don't know anything. I would 100% be encouraging them to do it and waste their picks. But no, if you're listening to this, God no, hard pass. We'll talk about this 10 weeks from now during the buys, and then we'll have this conversation on Roster the People properly, and that's what we'll actually do. But there's no other tight end that I'm interested in either, and none are being drafted. Josh Oliver, Johnny Mund, Robert Tonyan, I'm good. None of, maybe somebody can establish themselves at some point and be a waiver wire pickup for you, but these are not things that are being drafted, nor should they be. In reality, the way I look at this team, there are 2 things that 2.5 technically. It's Jefferson, it's Jones, handcuffed to Chandler. That's it. Addison if he fell a few rounds. If I could get Addison in like the 9th round because people are scared. Okay. I might have that conversation with you. So it's like that's kind of where we are. That's the whole team for me as far as I'm concerned. It's funny because we talked about how the Vikings team is super different, but at the same time, it still works out to the same basic thing, which is like, there's like 3 things I'm interested in, and the rest of it's just kind of junk.
However much things change, they stay the same.
Any final thoughts on the Vikings?
No, I think we covered it.
We covered it. All right, there you go. At least they're not pretending to be a playoff team anymore. So, yeah, this is a team that I'm projected to come firmly in last in the division this year unless something truly unexpected happens. So plan accordingly for your fantasy drafts and make your adjustments. So tomorrow we're going to talk about another super fun team. That for years we could have also just crossed the number out and then done the same show, but we actually have to do it for real this year. So tomorrow we're going to talk about the New England Patriots. So tune in for that. But until then, keep up the nonsense.
I'm Tim Kitzer from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and you can find all the guys at ImportantNonsense.com. Kaboom!